Hello, everyone. This is Joy Morris, and I'm here with Anthony Guy to talk to you a little about volunteer voices. Over the course of this presentation, we'll talk some about the goals the committee put together when creating volunteer voices. We'll go over some of the amazing content in the collection, talk about who the targeted audience is, pull back the curtain on some of the architecture and technology involved, and briefly discuss what kinds of services are associated with volunteer voices. So without further ado, here's Anthony to talk about the goals of volunteer voices.
Thanks, Joy. The whole concept of volunteer voices is sharing. About 17 years ago, 10Share led an initiative to create the digital collection that became Volunteer Voices, with its focus on the growth of democracy in Tennessee. In the beginning, the team dedicated to this project worked off of 3 foundational goals. They knew there were a lot of great artifacts and resources spread throughout the state, so they set their sights on creating a collection of 10,000 items that showcase the diverse history and culture of Tennessee. That goal of 10,000 has been met and surpassed. They wanted the collection to be used in classrooms and information centers, so they chose the growth of democracy in Tennessee for an early theme. They knew items related to this concept were plentiful across the state and would also match more readily with the curriculum being taught in the K-12 schools. Digitization training and support was necessary for early buy-in, so 3 digitization and content specialists were spread around the state, working out of Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. They gave their time to the smaller communities surrounding them to encourage early adoption. These efforts ensured teachers and librarians would have the skills to digitize their items and keep the collection growing. I think it's about time to dive into the collection. Of course, the first thing you're going to have to do is find your way to it. The good news is there are a number of pathways you can take. Let's check them out. A simple Google search of volunteer voices will reveal a number of those options. Now, the collection is maintained by the University of Tennessee as a part of their digital collections, and that's the most direct path to get there. So let's go ahead and click on that path right there, and it'll show you the collection. It pops right up. We can also get to the collection by going through the Secretary of State's website. So we can click on that, and that'll take us to this page. Scroll down a little bit, and you have the opportunity to search or browse the collection, and here we are. Another path to get to Volunteer Voices is through our old friend 10Share. So we'll click on that. Now, one thing I want to point out, this volunteervoices.org is no longer a good destination, so don't go to volunteervoices.org. You can, however, click on this here, and that takes you to the Secretary of State's site, which we've seen before. And if we go back, you can click on the original Volunteer Voices database, and that, of course, takes you directly into the digital collection. I also want to point out that you can get to the Volunteer Voices content by going through the Digital Public Library of America, or the DPLA.
So a little about the content of Volunteer Voices. Volunteer Voices is a digital collection that provides access to primary sources regarding Tennessee history and culture. There are over 10,000 objects scanned into the Volunteer Voices digital collection. From the home page, you can see a list of broad topics. This will give you a general idea of what all is included in the Volunteer Voices collection. One way to navigate the collection would be to filter the search results down from the broad topics and go from there. I really liked a lot of the features in the search results. So, for example, let me pull up William Barrett's affidavit. And when you click on that search result, you'll see tabs at the top of the window that displays the search result. You can see that view where you change the pages, a pages view itself, and the transcript of the item. And then below that, the details. So all of this interesting content on the collection objects themselves. And let's look at a photograph as well. So I'm going to type in World War II unit. Okay, and my search results here, of course, there's no tabs at the top, but you can move the picture around in the window. You can zoom way in, return that to home, or make it a full screen. I hope you all get a chance to check out Volunteer Voices and see what all they have to offer by way of primary sources. Now, once I could tear my eyes off of all of that intriguing content, I began to dig deeper into what types of users would be considered the targeted audience of the collection. From the content of the collection, we can make assumptions about what users would find value in this resource, but looking at the history behind Volunteer Voices and the institutes involved in the project, we're provided with evidence of who the intentional audience was. Because the project was started by an organization that promotes sharing resources between Tennessee libraries, it's fair to conclude that librarians and library workers are an intentional audience. And because the project was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, we can ascertain that curators and collection managers can be included in that list as well. Furthermore, the University of Tennessee was and is the home of Volunteer Voices, so the audience must include teachers and students. At some point, the audience must have included K through 12 social studies teachers and students because of those links on the home page, even though those links no longer show any results. I believe that Volunteer Voices could reach a wider audience to include more library patrons and independent researchers through a better marketing strategy. But I also believe that because the purpose is to share resources, ultimately the audience is actually every single person that shows an interest in Tennessee history.
Let's take a moment to consider the architectural framework and technology supporting the Volunteer Voices collection. All of the digital collections at the University of Tennessee's digital libraries are managed and delivered in Islandora according to their site. And they use Drupal in their front end and Fedora and Solr for digital assets management, things like search, for example. Now, in terms of metadata, this collection utilizes a MODS metadata schema, and that was chosen because it's easier to use than MARC, and it offers more descriptive richness than Dublin Core. Also, the locally controlled vocabulary options allow the collection to be better connected to the curriculum being taught in Tennessee schools. Now, if you go onto any of the items in the collection, you can click on them, scroll down, and see the option to view the MODS record. And there you have that record in all its glory. Well, that's about it for our tour of Volunteer Voices. I sincerely hope that all of you take some time to explore the collection. There's some truly wonderful items there to be found, something for everyone for sure. And it's so easy to get lost in it if you're like me. And Joy, I'm sure that's what's going to happen to many of you. So thanks for taking the time to watch our video. And we look forward to answering your questions and having a great discussion about this wonderful resource.